manifestation of his glory that became visible. Even though the Bible said the Lord came there, it doesn't mean that his throne is vacant in heaven. This is the uniqueness of God. This is what makes God God. Now the next question is, how did he come down? How exactly did God come down? Exodus 19 from verse 18 to 21. Let's look at it together. Are we together, Pastor?
Now,
yes.
Mount Sinai was completely in smoke because the Lord descended upon it in fire.
So he came down in fire. Why fire? Why fire? Why not rain? Why not wind? Why fire? I know this God, he wouldn't do anything without a reason. Why did he choose to come down in fire? So fire, it's also a manifestation of who God is. That means any fire we see here did not begin from here. It came down in fire. And the Bible said the whole mountain was filled with smoke. The mountain was filled with smoke. And God came down in fire. When you talk about a mountain, you're talking about rock. Can rock burn? Where is the smoke coming from? Because if you set the rock on fire, you won't see any smoke. You can't burn a stone to a level where the stone will begin to emit smoke. Now, you can set grasses on fire. You can set trees on fire. Those things that we know that fire can consume. Now, the God deliberately chose the mountain because he knows that if he had landed on the valley, you will say maybe somebody one hunter mistakenly set the bush on fire. And yet he chose the mountain, the rock. And the Bible says he came in fire. And the mountain was covered with smoke. Go ahead, sir. And if you look at that, the Bible also said, and the mountain quake. The mountain quake. So there was earthquake. The mountain itself quake. Because the presence of God was upon the mountain. And God came in like fire. And there was smoke everywhere. The mountain that used to be high, the Bible said it quaked. Imagine you say, Lord, let's have meeting in my house. The house you built with your retirement money. And God finally came. And your house quaked. Not because he really wants to destroy it. But this is who God is. The mountain itself doesn't have the capacity to carry that fire. So when God came on the mountain quaked. Look at the next verse. Please go ahead.
And when the blast of the trumpet sounded long and became louder and louder, Moses spoke and God answered him by voice.
So Moses spoke and God answered him by voice. So if you see Moses, and Moses can tell us how the voice of God sounds. So there is a man who has heard the audible voice of God. And this man is called Moses. Moses was not terrified. Moses was not intimidated by the fire on the mountain. He wasn't terrified by the thick smoke on the mountain. Moses was not terrified by the mountain being quaked at the presence of God. in the midst of all that manifestation, the Bible said the man Moses spoke with God. He spoke with God. There are people who knows how God's voice sound. That you have never heard doesn't mean someone has not heard. That is why I said in grace we are not met. There are people that God is comfortable to speak to them. Go ahead, please. Go ahead quickly to verse 21.
Then the Lord came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mountain. And the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain. And Moses went up.
The Lord came down. He came at the top of the mountain. And the Lord called Moses, come up. And Moses went up. Hey. God will never descend to your level. You must work on yourself and create the capacity to step up to where God is. Now God has come down to the mountain. Moses is at the valley. But if Moses is ready to have his fellowship with God, he must go up to the valley, to the mountain. He must leave the valley and go up to the mountain. God will never stoop so low to your level. You have to work on yourself. You have to create the capacity. You have to build some inner energy and strength and a capacity to be able to step up to God's level if you want to hear God. Are we still here, sir? Please go ahead.
Verse 21. And the Lord said to Moses, go down and warn the people, lest they break through to gaze at the Lord, and many of them perish.
What is gaze? God came down so that the people will know his God. And the same God is saying to Moses, he said, go and warn the people, warn them, lest they break through to gaze. What is the meaning of gaze? As it stands, I don't know the meaning of gaze. I thought to gaze is to look. God said if they look at me, they die. Gaze. To gaze is to look at something with curiosity. He said if they... Do you have another translation, sir? Any other translation?
Yes, sir.
Any other translation?
The Message.
Okay.
God said to Moses, go down, warn the people not to break through the barricades, to get a look at God, lest many of them die.
He said don't even try to look, because if you look at me, you die. Now how can God come down for their sake, and yet God say if you look, you die? It is the grace they found in his sight that has allowed him to come down. It is the that brought him down. But how can the same God said, if they look at me, they die? It is not because God will kill them. It is because the human nature doesn't have the capacity to look at what God carries. See, God is holy. It is his holiness that will kill them. Not because God said they have to die. God is trying to explain to them that I am too holy, that if you look at me with that natural eye, you will die. Because my holiness cannot behold iniquity. Now watch this. Before now, the same God has told Moses, he said, consecrate the people. He had gone to consecrate them. He gave another instruction. He said, let them wash their clothes. They did. He said, let them not have sexual intercourse before coming. They obey. After all these things, the Lord said, they will not come up to the mountain. They shall remain at the base, at the valley. They obey. The Lord said they shouldn't come close to the mountain. There should be a line, a demarcation, a barricade that will prevent them from coming close to the mountain. They obey. Now the same God said, if you gaze, if you look at me, you die. So there is a level of consecration that's even after being consecrated by a man of God as Moses, that didn't qualify you to look at God. All that preparation can only bring you to the base of the mountain. Please show me one man that is holy. Please, I want to see this holy woman. Do you know the definition of holiness? There were instructions that was given to them. They obeyed. Those self-righteousness and those things they did can only qualify them to the base. And in that qualification, they are not still allowed to gaze. If they gaze, they die, they perish. Not because he came down for their destruction, but God is nature, his holiness. While we are striving for holiness, while we are looking forward for holiness, God clothed himself in holiness. God is too holy, too clean, too pure, to a level where his holiness is also a danger to human. If you look at my holiness, you will not survive. Tell them not to gaze at me. Let them stand by the base of the mountain. Oh God, oh Lord. This is where tears begin to drop from my eyes. Do you know that why these people were told not to gaze at God? There is a man who was standing with God. Father, what was it that qualified Moses that these people lack? This is my cry. Let what qualified Moses qualify me. They were not allowed to climb, to touch the mountain. And the reason why they can't even touch the base of the mountain is because the presence of God has overwhelmed the mountain. The mountain ceased to be ordinary mountains. The mountain has contacted the glory and the presence of God. Things can carry the presence of God. That's why sometimes it amazes me when people say, you see this oil they pray, I don't believe in it. You see this thing they do, I don't believe in it. See, things, objects can carry the presence of God. God doesn't need to tell the mountain what to do. For the fact that God is there, the mountain loses its earthly significance. And then it contacted the high presence of Elohim. In grace, we are not equal. Don't go beyond the base. And a man is dropping from the mountain to tell them and say, God's grace, we are not equal. You want to know holiness? How holy and how righteous is Moses? Moses, one of the reasons Moses left Egypt was because he killed. He committed murder and ran for his life. Who did he kill? He killed the same people who saved him from the river. It was the same Egyptians who saved Moses. They took him to the palace. He had his education in the palace before the eyes of Pharaoh. He became Pharaoh's adopted son. He ate in the palace, had his clothing in the palace, has his education in the palace. They saw him grow to become a man in the palace. And one day the same Moses rose against the nation of Egypt and said, thus says the Lord. If you were to be the Pharaoh's daughter who picked Moses from the river, and one day you saw the same boy you picked from the river grow up to become a man, and then he says to you,